We're going to do it again. Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, everybody.
Sorry,
Welcome
guys.
to Spirit Sessions, A View of the Light. We are here today to have a super awesome episode with these amazing new friends of ours, Dr. Dave Bettenhausen and Carla Bogni-Kidd. We're so excited to share their adventures and their mission with you. Before we get started, though, please take a minute to share this out. Invite your friends. For those who are coming to us on the replay, welcome. We're so excited that you guys are here, and those on the podcast as well. So whoever shares out the most, don't forget, you'll get a chance to win our Egyptian Soul Spa meditation, which is an incredible journey. So please take a moment just to share this out. Welcome everybody, and welcome to Dave and Carla. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, guys. We are so excited to have you here.
Our pleasure.
Yep, we're thrilled to be here, Beth.
Thanks.
It's okay. It's okay. So we're just gonna get right into it. And if each one of you could just give us a little bit of your origin story about how you came into this purpose in life and how you two met, actually.
So I was a physician. I bought a practice that Carla was the office manager back in 1998. I grew up in Nebraska and Iowa. We started a practice. Carla and I soon became best friends immediately, like we had known each other for a very long time. And it was really some 15 years into the practice when we had an experience. We had to start electronic medical records, and it was horrible to change our practice in the office. And it was burning me out, and I became the most grouchy, difficult person to deal with. Sitting there staring at a computer instead of talking to patients was horrible. Carla said I was unbearable. And I'll leave it at that for a moment.
Well, we weren't 29. So we were used to having charts and pencils, and we had a computer, but not everything. So it was really stressful. And Dave, who I love to say is a cross between Yogi Bear and Fred Flintstone, was just absolutely a crab, unapproachable. And I said, we have to do something. I'll call a counselor and you go talk to somebody, or what about trying meditation? So, of course, being a man, sorry, everybody, he said, I'll try meditation. And so we decided we would do it in the office before the patients began. So the first day, we had two other girls that worked in the office with us. We all sat down and we had, dimmed lighting and serene music and
candle.
Yeah, and a candle. And we all commented on how difficult it is to shut your brain off. And meditation is wonderful for a million reasons, as Dave likes to tell people from the medical standpoint, because, it lowers your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your blood sugar. It helps you sleep. There's Fortune 500 companies that have meditation areas because it makes their workers more productive. So it's good for everybody, not just to reach the spiritual world.
And it actually lowers cortisol, the stress hormone.
Right.
And what's great about that is cortisol is one of those stress hormones that makes you gain weight. I had gained significant weight over a couple of bad marriages and a couple of bad other issues, plus this medical record things changing it. And after I started to meditate, very interestingly, I sort of did set a goal to be my best self and all of these things, but I lost 2 pounds a week for 52 weeks.
Wow.
So 104.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
I was 2 pounds, and now
2
I'm.
pounds a week is a lot, though. They tell you that's that's a huge weight loss.
Yes.
So that's amazing.
So I got 10 years younger during that period of time, trying to deal with the stress of electronic medical records and starting to meditate.
So meditation is not just to shut off your brain, which we were trying to do, and disconnect from all the electronics. But like I said, the first day, we really had a difficult time shutting everything off. The second day, we all saw colors, not knowing at the time what that was. And the third day, the girls said, oh, we don't want to come in, it's 7:30. You go ahead and do it, and we'll do it at home. So Dave and I did it, and we heard the patients coming in. It was about 35 minutes later. And we got up, went to our adjoining offices, and Dave said, Carla, I know you'll think I'm crazy, but I was just talking to a woman that I think was your mother. And I said, what? Now, I was open to this because I've always been into astrology and psychics and all of
Yeah.
the above. Dave, not so much. But
I was raised Catholic.
well, so was I.
It should-
Yes. But I thought to myself, my first thought was, why is she coming to you and not me? I was meditating also. And Dave had never met my mother. She had died like 18 years before. So he said she was jovial and she kept laughing and showing him a shoe. And I immediately went to the computer and I Googled ballroom dancing shoes, and like 60 or 70 pair appeared on the screen. And I said to Dave, which one? And he pointed to the exact shoe that my mother wore. My parents were ballroom dancers, and she wore the same type of shoe her entire life, a short pump, open-toed sandal. And back then they were satin, and you would re-dye them to match your dresses because we didn't have a lot of money. So, I mean, for him to pick that out, that was an aha moment. And then my sister also worked in the office at that time, went to the back and brought up her wallet with a picture in it. And she turned it around to Dave and said, is this who you were talking with? And he got very emotional. And we said, why are you emotional? He said, because it was a very spiritual, religious type feeling that I had when I was talking to her. And mind you, he never met her. So that got us started, and we wanted to meditate like all day, every day. We wanted to say to heck with the patients, but we didn't. We sat there and we just kept meditating regularly. And then a few days into it, Dave had this memory.
And so as I'm sitting there thinking and I'm getting this memory, then I say, I've got to tell Carla and Paul about this because it's just so interesting. But I remembered a time when I was 3 years old. Now, you shouldn't really remember things as a 3-year-old.
Right.
I did. I remembered a time when I was 3 and we got in a little blue sedan and we drove across the country. Again, I was from Nebraska and we were heading to Boston. And when we got to Boston, it was this big city.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to married student housing because my parents were going back to graduate school on the GI Bill. My dad had been in the Korean War. And so I remembered the married student housing, and then the memory went straight to the beach. And I remembered running on the beach and seeing sand and the ocean. And I knew that I had never, been on a beach and never seen an ocean when I was in Nebraska. And I was screaming and yelling. And as I was running on the beach, suddenly I heard this little girl yell, "Be quiet, you're bothering my family." And she ran over, she pushed me down, she sat on my chest, gave me a kiss on the forehead. Then she jumped up and she's standing there with her hands on her hips, and she's wearing this little blue 2-piece ruffled bathing suit.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear this woman yell, "Carla, that's not how little ladies act." And I'm telling Carla this memory. She looks at me and she goes,
I said, Dave, that was me. I remember that. I remembered it like it was etched in my mind forever because my parents were not well off. They were always divorcing and separating and getting back together because it was the good family. I was the youngest of 5 girls, never had my own swimsuit. I always had somebody else's, but for whatever day, Daddy rented, for whatever the reason was that day, Daddy rented 2 cabs because we didn't have a car. And we went to Revere Beach. And as Dave was describing this beach, my sister and I both knew exactly where it was because Revere Beach had a roller coaster and an amusement park with it. And when we got there, I didn't have the bathing suit. My parents took all of us across the street to one of those little cheesy souvenir stores. Yep. And they couldn't afford it, but I got my first brand new 2-piece blue ruffled bathing suit. And I mean, I could draw you the picture today, etched in my mind, the color, all of the above. And so when he was telling me that, it's like, how could you possibly know that? Another aha moment. So
at that moment, we're like, how did we meet when you lived in Boston and I lived in Nebraska in 1962? And how did I even remember that while I'm meditating? And all of these experiences were already starting to be interesting. The next few days as I was meditating again, I heard another woman talk to me. And she told me her name was Isabella. And as Isabella's talking, she says, "Well, Dave, I've known you and been with you for 6,000 years.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't know what this is. I'm trying to explain this to Carla. As a physician, I already think that possibly I'm losing my mind.
And he should have gone to the counselor.
And I should have gone to a counselor, and I didn't know better. As a man, I said, no, I don't need anybody to tell me anything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Still doesn't.
yes. And Isabella says, well, Dave, I've been with you through all of your lives. So now I'm like, all right, this strange woman who's actually told me that she's a spirit guide has said she's been with me for 6,000 years through all of my lives. I have a memory of meeting knowing Carla when we were 3 and 4 years of age. I'm like, and I'm talking to Carla's dead mother. So I think, I don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. This meditation thing is pretty darn interesting. It doesn't match any of my Catholic upbringing. None of this matches anything. We start doing a little research, but we keep meditating. Mm-hmm. I found research by Ian Stevenson on children with past life memories. Some 3,000 cases where these kids that are 3 or 4 have these past life memories. I started doing religious research. We were looking at the history of reincarnation and which religions believed in it, where was it at one time, because it's part of the Jewish faith through Kabbalah.
Right.
I found one of those early church leaders was called Origen in about 200 AD, and he wrote that the soul existed before its first life, after its first life, and that there was transmigration of the soul and it could return again. And if you match that up with the Kabbalah teaching, which says if you don't complete all of your jobs, you'll come back to learn more, I thought, well, maybe there's some religious part here that's true. And then we have the Hindus and the Buddhists who believe in that. And we started to see that about really 33% of the world's population believes in reincarnation. And
it's growing.
And it's growing. Yeah. And that even Christian groups report 20 to 25% believe in reincarnation, even though it's against the current teaching of the church. And I said, so maybe there's something here. Isabella kept showing up and talking. And then there was a day I had another memory. And this time I was standing in a dark alley, looking across the dark alley, and there was a woman there who was, I'll say, reminded me of Carla. I knew it was Carla. I knew it was her blue eyes looking at me. But she had on a little gold band, fringe skirt, was dressed like a flapper. Mm. She was crying out and screaming, and I saw 2 large flashes. I heard a bang and realized I was shot. Wow. And I was thrown back on the ground, and I knew I was dying in the ground, and it was starting to disappear. And everything went dark except for the light that I could see up in this alley. And then suddenly these 2 dark hands reached down, picked me up, and I started going through space, time, and eternity, following 2 golden angels, or 2 golden wings. And I woke, and then I was out, and I had to tell Carla this message. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know what any of this means. And Isabella was saying, be patient, you'll get more of the story.
By the way, he talks to Isabella every day, all day, in his left ear. So she has given us everything, more information. As we meditated, I asked questions and wrote everything down. We have journals and journals. Every question you could ever think of, she answered, unless it was about the future, because she says we're not supposed to ask the future because it can interfere with our path. So
the next day, meditating, I get more of the story, but actually days before, I'm shot in this alley. And I'm in a little car that looks very old, and I'm driving to a wedding of a man named Angelo who used to do business at the bank where I was a little junior banker. I'm a young man. And I'm going with a friend, and we get out, and I run up the steps of Ashland Auditorium in Chicago, Illinois. And I enter a makeshift church in this big auditorium. And a woman walks out on the stage, and she's the wedding singer. And it's the woman who was standing in the alley.
Mm.
And she sings the Ave Maria, and it's absolutely beautiful. I am, for some reason, completely drawn to her. And I chase her down at the reception and try to meet her, and she keeps kind of blowing me off. She finally agrees to dance once. We dance, and I ask her to go to breakfast the next day. And she's very hesitant, but she finally says, okay, I'll meet you at 10 o'clock tomorrow at Marino's.
Which is still in Chicago, by the way.
Wow.
And Ashland Auditorium is in Chicago, and I didn't even know it existed before this day.
Except there was when you get out of the car, he saw the sign on the top of the building that said Ashland Auditorium.
Wow.
And so the next time I meditated, I was at the breakfast. And I'm meeting this blonde woman who's not dressed fancy, dressed in just this nice wool coat and stocking cap pulled down. And she looks very pure and simple. Because, you know, as the flapper, she was painted up pretty significantly, but not for breakfast. And we have breakfast, and we go for a walk along the Chicago coastline, and she tells me her name is Ruby Donaldson, and that she was born in Bullock, Georgia, and that her parents' names are James and Anna, and that she moved to Chicago to become a dressmaker and a singer. Mm. And so I tell Carla all this, and when I tell her, she says, you know, oh, I knew it happened, that the wedding was January 10th, 1925. And she said, well, that's not that long ago. There should be information somewhere.
So I got onto Ancestry.com, and I did indeed find Ruby Donaldson, born in 1904, to Anna and James Donaldson, one of 11 children.
In Bullock, Georgia.
In Bullock, Georgia. There were pictures of my parents, and our names were like in the census records and all of those things. And then I got into old newspapers from Chicago, and I found the wedding of Angelo Jenna to Lucille Spinola, January the 10th, 1925, at Ashland Auditorium. And, you know, not knowing anything about this name, Angelo Jenna was the head mobster right before Al Capone in Chicago. So, you know, that was a little bit, you know, we've since done a lot of research on that. He was a nasty guy. And I will just say that, you know, we have what we call our soul families and the soul groups that we travel in. And I'm sure that you two have been in there, because we find most of the podcast hosts have been in our family, and we find them in a past life somewhere. But Angelo Jenna in this life was my first husband, because we had unfinished business to get to, because in that life he was very abusive, and he beat me and he raped me and he did all kinds of nice things, because we have all been saints and sinners in past lives. So Isabella, as she was telling Dave all these details, she said, you know, you're not just here for fun and entertainment. You actually have a purpose when you come here, and it's to get off the karmic wheel. So everybody, well, most of us know what the 10 commandments are, but to simplify it, she said, I'll give you the 5 simple rules for living, which, by the way, we put in book 1, and they're completely outlined so that you know, if you live a life without conceit, jealousy, selfishness, and unforgiveness, and you do everything out of compassion and love, you will get off the karmic wheel. And so again, in the first book, we put in 20 of our past lives, but at the end of each one of those, we actually wrote down what we did wrong that fell under conceit, jealousy, selfishness, or unforgiveness, and why we returned. So, you know, the stories are interesting, but knowing whether you graduated, that's more interesting, because we all want to get off this karmic wheel.
Yes.
And so Isabella sort of guided us through a journey, and the journey included discovering 42 past lives for me and 34 for Carla. And we found each other in 29 of them. And probably the most together. Yeah. And probably the most emotional point was because we kept getting more and more of the Ruby and JJ story. And there was a day I came in and I said, you've got to hear the rest of the story that I know. And I started to tell Carla the story. And I had her sit down and I started to talk. And I literally started to feel as if I was JJ Wright. And as I'm telling her the story, in front of me, Carla, I don't know how else to say it, but changes. And she started to answer the conversation and have the same memory at the same moment.
As Ruby.
And then when that happened, we were like, well, we felt uncomfortable because they were a very emotional couple that had a very passionate,
right.
But we felt strange. But we also
which is in the book, by the way.
But we also were like, why do we both know this? And when that came through together, there was no way we could stop writing everything down that we found out. And then we started to look at patterns, so we knew things we did wrong in each life. And then we started to see patterns that were even outside of that. We started to see patterns where we might be the slave owner, and in the next life we were the slave.
Yeah.
And then we found a whole set of lives that followed each other back and forth from Viking to Scotland to England to Scotland to Vikings.
Wow.
And we were actually living the other side of each war that occurred over the same period of time, realizing each time we thought we were right. But then the next life we were still right, but we were on the opposite side until you realize there's really no winner in war. There's nobody who's really right. That you're just living the other side to learn the experience so that you can learn compassion. And those are the things that started to change us even more. And we started to write the first book, which was The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth. And those include the 4 people we met, which was Carla's mother, my spirit guide, God, and then we met Elizabeth, which was Carla's spirit guide.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. Like, I could just listen to these stories all day, and I definitely want to hear more. There was a question that we were given. How did you reconcile reincarnation with your Catholic upbringing? And I know that's something that a lot of people have probably struggled with, being able to really embrace it, because there's this deep knowing, right? We always have this deep knowing of something that is a truth for us, but then our minds get in the way and our programming gets in the way. So how did you work through that for yourselves?
Well, interestingly enough, we wrote our second book, which was Hell No Reincarnation. And part of that was the study that we did to figure out that Origen, who was an early Catholic or Christian writer, still believed in reincarnation. He actually was excommunicated 200 years after his death, and all of his writings were, or most of his writings were destroyed because he was considered then a heretic, Oh, and then the Council of Nicaea, where they started to vote on whether Jesus was God or not. And if you start to look through early Christian history, there's actually a period of time where Jesus was thought to be a great prophet or teacher or rabbi. Then it was thought that maybe he was a created God, lesser than than the God. And then it became, well, he couldn't be lesser, he must be equal with. So even in the early Catholic Church writing, they don't have a term until 325 on what Jesus's real role is. So if you start to look at that, you start to question whether the Catholic Church has everything now the way that they think it should be. So of course it made me question. We started to research hell, which was another issue.
And just plain and simple, the God I know, like any loving parent, wouldn't give you one chance and say, go to hell. Right. It does not make any sense. And why can't Jesus have love? Why does Jesus have to just die? Why can't Jesus love? And the people that want to believe in Jesus in the way the church has wanted us to believe in Jesus are the ones that refuse to take responsibility for their own actions. Right. They think it's easier to blame it, give it all to Jesus and let him take it away. No, we're here for our own responsibility, and we will pay for whatever we do or we don't do. And we don't get to hand it off to Jesus.
Yeah. And then if you start looking even back farther, you find in the Old Testament, you actually find that sacrifice can't remove sin.
Right.
It's actually that sacrifice makes you ritually pure. And so the only thing you could sacrifice for, lots of strange stories in the Old Testament, but women during menstruation became ritually impure.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to sacrifice to make the woman ritually pure. If you were a mortician and you touched a dead body, you had to sacrifice to make yourself now ritually pure again, so you could be in God's presence, go to a temple, do those things.
Luckily, we're smarter now.
Yes, they have this Old Testament idea of the scapegoat,
Right.
which is you sacrificed a goat, and that meant the demons went away out of somebody, but that was to make you healthy.
Right.
And now the New Testament has this story where Jesus is the scapegoat for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
When sacrifice doesn't make you sinless,
Right.
you have to atone. That's the story of the Old Testament. That's the story of the book of Leviticus. Atonement means you are responsible for your own actions. And in fact, the word for sin that became sin after all the translations was kata. And in the Old Testament, kata means failed to reach your goal. That doesn't sound like sin. That sounds like that sounds like more like reincarnation. If you fail to reach your goal, try harder and we'll give you another chance.
Right.
And that's really the reconciliation. And that's what we wrote in the second book.
That's perfect. Yeah.
So in Hell No Reincarnation, the reason we wrote that was to reconcile what our experience had just been with reincarnation and what we could find in regard to reincarnation. Because my family disowned me, all but one sister, because they think that I'm cavorting with Satan here. And yes. So, he's not.
Right.
And it makes a lot more sense to believe in reincarnation than it does to believe in. We've got to remember the Bible was written way back when things were different. Thank God we have graduated and we don't do everything so violently and brutally as they did back in those days. And you can't take the Bible literally.
Right.
If you did, then, Lot gave his daughters to some soldiers just to have some fun. I mean, those people would be in jail today. You can't do it literally. Or I divorce thee, and you're divorced. No, because the courts wouldn't be in business.
Right.
You couldn't make any money. It doesn't.
That would make it easier, though, wouldn't it?
It would have made it much easier. Yes.
Yes, definitely.
I would have appreciated that.
Yeah, we both would. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing people forget frequently, and they like to bring up this, how horrible it sounds in the Old Testament, what was going on. There's a lot of difference between what's a description of what's going on and what's in the Bible that was prescriptive or tells you how to live.
Right.
In fact, all those bad things happening in the Bible, again, this is another interesting approach, but if you look at it, God makes this covenant with Abraham, and then the Jewish people or the Hebrew people break the covenant. They're horrible. What does God doesn't just destroy them all. He makes another covenant with Noah. He doesn't destroy them all. He makes another covenant with King David. He doesn't destroy it all. He makes another covenant, supposedly Jesus. He doesn't destroy it all. What does he do? Each time man screws up, he gives him another chance, because that's what a loving parent would do.
Yeah. I love that. It definitely is. Yeah. Teresa, you going to say something?
Oh no, it's true. It's true what he was saying. So I was like, I love that.
Yeah. She's been going through her own personal journey with religion and just having some releasing of programs and traumas and things like that. And so it's really relevant for her right now, which I hope that's okay. I shared, Teresa, sorry, but it's so important that, there's this compassion for that experience. And I think that it's beautiful the way that you two were able to really help give another level of understanding that maybe some people haven't been able to really embrace yet. Your perspective, your experiences are so much more supportive and compassionate and loving. And I really appreciate that you guys show up with that. It's beautiful. So I really want to hear more about some of these past lives you remembered. I think what what's been your most profound? I know the first ones were probably just incredibly profound, but what's been kind of the most profound past life experience that you two have had together, or memory?
So,
well, I'm going to say that Dave came in one day and he said, Carla, I don't want you to think badly of me or of Tom, who was my husband at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why? And he said, well, sit down. And he proceeds to tell me about this life while we were living. It was a Mayan life. We were Mayans. Mm-hmm. And it was in what year?
700 BC.
Okay. And Dave is an underling priest. And my former husband, Tom, was the head priest. And they did sacrifices. Mm-hmm. And they would, when they weren't at war and they didn't have prisoners to sacrifice, they would go out amongst the community and bring in little virgin girls from the community. And there was a particular time when my other 4 sisters and myself were brought in, and we weren't sacrificed, but they would bleed us and rape us. And now we're little girls. So he tells us about this. He's telling me this experience, and he's crying, telling me this experience. And I'm like, what? Because Dave can flip right back into that life. And he can, if it's like, it's not like past life regression, because he can just go there. In fact, I have taped him. Yeah. He had a life where he was an 8-year-old stuttering little boy, and he stuttered through the whole tape. Wow. Yeah, he can go right back to it. He has a really unbelievable gift. But so that was kind of horrific. We do have a life where we live in England. We don't have anything. His name's Robert. My name is Sarah. We're from the Cotswold area. And we just plain love each other. And we're happy. And it's not without adversity. Every life has adversity. That's how we get past it. We've had divorces in this life and child loss and all kinds of things, but you learn to get past it, because if we can remember, we are all infinite human beings. Our soul never dies. And this is just a speck of time. And so you get over it. And sometimes people think I'm callous because I don't react like I used to, like a blubbering maniac. I'm still blubbering over everything because I feel it deeper, but I don't get as upset. If a kitty gets killed on the road, I still have a problem with it. But I keep telling myself, God does not let animals suffer. Animals feel limitations. They don't feel pain, which is easier to take. But if you can just remember that we're infinite, and we don't have to think, why did God do that to me? God didn't. You're just learning. Think of it as a father or mother, and you don't have to worry about it. But that particular life, we loved each other. We worked hard. It was a great life. I died early. He went on, but it was just a simple life where we loved each other and we were nice to each other.
And what Carla just said brought up an idea, because people always bring up this concept of, why does God allow suffering and all of these issues? Sometimes the doctor in me starts to look, psychologically, when you overcome suffering, you become stronger and you feel successful. So that's one part. The other part is, every time you experience something that's negative, you can now learn a form of compassion for others. Then there comes part of that is important, I think, with past life regression, the Akashic record, and all of those kind of issues that people talk about. If our subconscious in this life literally does remember everything almost like as a negative or positive value, which sort of relates to karma, but our subconscious remembers everything as a negative or positive value. And the example there is, if you burn yourself as a young child, the next time you touch something hot, you pull back faster. So that negative experience becomes protective. You pull back faster. So even if you don't remember them consciously in this life, if you had a negative past life experience, you will try to avoid that, which protects you in this life.
Well, sometimes you don't listen to your inner self.
Right.
And you should be.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah,
So
go ahead, sorry.
So it starts to bring in things that are very important lessons of why we may suffer, we may have to experience some things, because without experiencing them, we don't learn compassion. You know, again, we have a life where we're indentured servants on the island of Bermuda, but we have a life way before that where we had slaves, and it was normal to have slaves.
So we've all been bad. We've all been saints and sinners.
Black and white.
Mm-hmm. Rich and poor. Pagan, religious.
Yeah, Jewish and Muslim and all sorts of different things, because if you don't live the other experience, how will you understand? Right. And then it starts to bring some lessons that we've learned along the way too. It's not surprising that you return in the same groups, because you of course have lessons to share and learn with that group. And we return for 2 reasons. And we return for 2 reasons. One reason is that we're either really good with each other, or the other reason is that we really have something still to learn from each other. So it's to test us or teach us, or help us or teach us. And so as you go through those lessons, you see things, again, we follow in the same groups. You start to realize, I'm going to give you an example. If you were alcoholic and you had an alcoholic son because you raised him that way, and then that son has a child, do not be surprised if you don't come back as your son's son, because now you have an alcoholic father. Right. And why does that happen? Because someone has to learn and finally be the one to break the cycle. Mm-hmm. So if you're alcoholic, you should break the cycle. Don't bring this into your next family.
Or if you're married and you have a cheater for a spouse, don't be surprised if in a past life you were again with them, but you were the cheater. Right. So you have to feel it. And, you know, it's kind of tit for tat, but it isn't, because it's to learn something. Dave's father, Dave got to live part of his father's past life review, which happens, you know,
in between lives.
Religions call it atonement. But his father was a slave owner. He would go over and take families, break them up, chain them to the bottom of his boat and bring them to Bermuda, and then they'd end up in America. But in his last days here, his father was the nicest man ever. He was a high school principal, but in the last 20 years of his life, he had Parkinson's disease and literally was chained to his own wheelchair. But he overcame it. He was nice, he was happy. So sometimes the lessons aren't so black and white. But we'll say that our third book, the manual, it narrows down. We all know our astrological sign, which is directly related to our past karma. But besides that, we have 12 traits and 12 archetypes. So when God designs us, being the intelligent designer that he is, she is, we're given a trait and an astrological sign. The archetype is the only one that we get to choose with the help of our spirit guide and our counsel. Now, if in the past we were not good to our family, they may suggest to us to be a caregiver type. And if we choose not to do that, then God may zing us with a couple little elementals
or lessons
to ground us. So in the manual, you already know who you are as far as your astrological sign. Read through and see what the karma is related to them, because it will be either selfishness, conceit, jealousy, or unforgiveness. And then look at your archetypes and look at your traits and ask your friends and your family, which one do you think I am? That gives you a clue into why you're here and what you should be working on.
That's awesome.
It's heavy reading. It's heavy. I recommend only a couple hours at a time. Lots to take in.
So I want to just give you an example using us. We'll think we're both fall under the selfish in our past life. In the past life, as Ruby and JJ, we didn't consider anybody else. We went ahead and got involved no matter who it affected, and it affected many people. You know, I ended up shot in an alley because we didn't consider anybody else. We considered our own passion first. So
even though it was hot.
Even though it was not. The story was good. We won't go there yet.
We had to edit out a lot in the first book. Let's put it that way.
But we're born in, Carla's born in February, and I'm born in March.
I'm a cusp Pisces. He's a Pisces.
And so that falls under the angel of selfishness.
Mariel's Legion, the yellow angel.
And so in this life, when we found that out, we were like,
we're not selfish.
I don't think I'm a selfish person. But that's because you're actually given an angel of selfishness to help you, to ask you, is this a selfish thing you're doing? So it helps move you along in your lessons. So you actually, everyone has an angel that gives you a chance to help you if you'll listen. And a spirit guide, which is different than an angel, that can help you if you listen. Sometimes it's that little voice in your head that says, is this what you should be doing?
So meditate, do it religiously, like you would make your bed, take a shower, brush your teeth. Try to do 35 minutes a day. Don't expect to receive messages like Dave gets. Just expect to quiet your mind, because how else can they talk to you if you don't listen, if you don't quiet your mind?
So you're talking for meditation, just sitting quietly, just kind of letting everything go, just letting your body relax.
Yes.
So,
we do it with music just because I can't put my brain off. And if I do anything,
I tend to fall asleep. That's one of my, but they say that it's okay. Yeah. Okay.
Do it before, after you've gotten up and you're awake, because I fall asleep too if I do it at night. Yeah.
So awesome. It does increase melatonin, so it will help you sleep.
Right.
So, we should say that our fourth book, it's a little bit different.
Okay.
Number 1, The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God and Elizabeth. That was from the beginning our experience in 20 past lives with all those 5 simple rules for living. Book 2, Hell No Reincarnation, was the reconciliation between what we were living and experiencing and what we had been taught, with 7 more of our past life stories. Book 3, the manual, we kind of lace one of our past life stories all through it, but we also include in there 6 famous people from past lives. For instance, Cleopatra. 3 consecutive lives, and you can't read this anywhere. This was given to us from Isabella. Why Cleopatra was the way she was. That's in the manual. And then in book 4, we are not the main characters. The main characters, we are in the book. We're characters in the book, but it's about an itinerant preacher
from the Second Temple period, which is
in Jerusalem,
which is really a couple hundred years before Jesus, the 70 years after Jesus's birth. That time frame, it talks about an itinerant preacher and his love. It's my favorite book because it was written different, and how it's written is, we sat down and Isabella wrote that book. So I don't like the word channeling, but she would tell me part of the story. I would tell Carla, and Carla would type. She'd tell me part of the story, and Carla would type. And we wrote the book from the first chapter to the end, straight through. Which,
other than editing and all of those things,
but the other one was a pile of books this big that we tried to make. That we tried to make into a book. So we were moving sections all over.
It's the best love story ever. It really is. And I just want to address what that girl just said. The reason that she can connect when she's vacuuming, it's like white noise. I get a lot of messages in between wake and sleep, and Dave does in the shower.
Every time those shower water.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I do the wake and sleep too. Like right when you're in that in between, when you're not fully awake, that's when I get my messages too, or visions. Yeah.
Now that's another good point you just made. So this is one of those science behind. During meditation, the time between wake and sleep, during hypnosis, you have increase in alpha and theta waves that occur in the brain when they study them, and both of those occur when you have memory. So it's interesting that most people, that's when they connect, and that's why the past life hypnosis and regression works for people. They start to live in the point of memory.
Right. That's awesome. This has been incredible. Seriously, we want to have you guys back because there's so much more we could talk about, and your stories are just, I'm so inspired. I definitely need to get your books. And is there another book in the works? Because you definitely have a lot more you could go with.
Yes.
We have those 4. We have a 5th one finished that is a meditation book that we are editing, and we have another one in the works that's called the first
4,000 years.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, we're always working. But we got puppies last year, and it kind of like we're old for puppies, so they kind of take up a lot of time. They're just starting to calm down, so hopefully we'll get back to it.
Yeah, they're really good now, but they're reaching that 15-month period, and so they'll
just getting out of their teenage phase, right?
Yes, exactly. Just get them past teenager, and we'll be fine.
Yep. That's awesome. So where can people find your books?
Certainly, they're all available on Amazon.
Barnes and Noble, Walmart,
all those sites. If you go to our website, thegiftofpastlives.com, there's a link to all of those sites that they can get our books.
And all the little local bookstores can order them too. So if you're in a little town, support them.
Awesome.
So, and also on the website, we do answer questions. So if people have questions, they can go to the Connect Us, and it sends us a direct email. And we can respond.
Perfect. Awesome. This is so incredible. Thank you so much for, following that path and letting yourself be led and trusting what you know, because more and more people being able to hear this and really allow themselves to just take in your experience is going to open up a whole nother world for the rest of us, to be able to also go on that journey in our own ways. And, Teresa and I've had experiences with past life stuff, the details that you can provide from your past lives is such a huge confirmation for those of us who maybe haven't had that kind of detail yet, that this is real, it's true, and to trust it.
Document it.
Yeah, document it. Absolutely. It's just, so beautiful. You've made me emotional. I've had some tears coming just because it's so validating and comforting, it's really comforting. So I appreciate that so much. And Teresa was going to do, is she back? I think she's trying to come back again. Her Wi-Fi's just been so rough today, guys. But she's hanging on. There she is. All right. While you're here, why don't you jump into the questions real quick? Or is she out again? Are you with us, T?
Am I back? I hope so.
Okay. Do you want to jump into the questions
really fast? Yeah. So this is a musical one, and this is always fun because it helps us connect on another way. So to both of you, what song seems to be a theme song or a recurring song in your life that it's inspiring, or what's your song?
Well, you might have to Google mine. It's by Carole King. It's called Way Over Yonder.
Oh, okay.
Google the words.
I remember.
We will.
Yonder.
Carole King's amazing. So yeah.
So I told you guys earlier I have one because it's a song that, because of learning CPR, it's Staying Alive. So bump, 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 staying alive. It's a great way to do CPR if you're doing it on a patient. But I'm just going to say, I don't remember the name of the song, but if you ever pass this way again, because it matches everything to do with our experience.
That's beautiful.
Oh, I love that. Second question was about the crystals. Do you work with any particular crystals or no?
We don't work with crystals. I have in the past. I've planted them around my house for different reasons. But Isabella has always said, our mind is very strong and capable, that if we believe our crystals are working, our crystals will work, just like a lot of other things. So I do have a great big pyramid-shaped amethyst that I have in the house. It's beautiful. That's my birthstone. But
yeah, Isabella says, though, the power is all within you. It really isn't the crystal. But if it makes you focus, good enough.
And if it looks pretty and it reminds you, put it in your hand. Yep.
I love that.
It's true. Good answers. And so the last one, I think Isabella mostly answers a lot of that. It's like, have you had extra dimensional contact, or beings that are not necessarily earthbound?
Correct. There is another realm. If you want to call it the unseen realm, if you want to call it heaven, if you want to call it another dimension. Also in book 3, the manual, we do talk about 7 planes of heaven and how they're related to the way man thinks of chakras and power. And it ends with the eye of God, which is the highest plane. If you want to call it oneness, that you hear some people talk about. And if you're looking for what's going to happen someday, the only future that Isabella says she wants to tell us is God means all of us to return home. We all will return to oneness. Whenever that oneness occurs, all 7 planes will collapse into one, because everyone will return to as the spark of love in which they were created, to the Creator.
And Earth being plane 1, as we raise up our vibration, raises with us. And then this has nothing to do with that. I just want to throw in that Isabella has told us over and over again that God is both male and female. Angels are both male and female. Spirit guides are both male and female. So if we have male and female tendencies, that's quite all right, because that's the way we were meant to be. It takes 2. And if the man is better staying home with the kids and the woman is better going to work, then have at it, because that's the way it needs to be.
And Lisa just asked a question. That book is called The Manual.
What book was that?
Yeah,
The manual.
The Manual.
Yep. Okay.
And that has the 7 planes of heaven, plus that's a color chart, plus there's another color chart with all our astrological signs and the related angel. So when you read that book, when you read your astrological sign, don't get all wigged out and think, oh, I'm a terrible person, I don't want to read it. We're all terrible. We've all been saints and sinners. That's why we're here, to improve, become our best self.
Right. Oh, I love it. It's so good. All right, T, who was the winner of our Share It Out last week?
Okay, so those share it out and those who make comments all get picked, and the next winner who gets to enjoy our beautiful Egyptian soul spa meditation with Mott is Mary Vosk.
Yay, congratulations, Mary. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. Thank you, Dave and Carla. This has been incredible. And again, we are definitely going to have you back. We'd love to have a whole show just on the 7 planes. I think that would be such a fascinating episode. So we'll stay in touch and we'll definitely get you back. And if you have any more, when your books come out, if you want to promote them, please send us an email, anytime. Okay. Thank you so much. And hope you guys have a blessed Sunday. We'll see you next week. And we love you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Night.